Excellent. Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Well, thank you for all the housekeeping. Hello to everybody. My name is Mike Hawley, and I will go ahead and take over and share the screen. I appreciate the invite to be here. It's coming full circle for me for a little bit, which I'll share with you in my my introduction. So I do have some slides that I'll work through today, but what we're talking about is, it's a little bit of a meta topic because here we are remotely talking about how we work remotely. And specifically, the angle that I want to take is thinking about collaborative workshops. So the lens that I'd love you to have is, we all work in meetings, obviously all day long. There's a difference between a meeting and a workshop, which I'll get into. But think about a workshop where we want to be collaborative and creative together. And what's the implication of doing that online? That's what I want to talk about. So just a bit about me and how I got here and what I do today and what my background and credentials are for this. So as Julia mentioned, I currently work as VP of Experience Strategy and Research at 0 Degrees. I've been in consulting or on the agency side for the last probably 15 to 20 years. And I continue that work with the group at 0 Degrees, which is a terrific group, very high attention to detail and great designers and researchers. So if you ever need any help, please reach out. But the full circle aspect of this is, I remember with a couple people here on this call, Kyle, I'm looking at you in particular, starting the New Hampshire UXPA many years ago. We had a nice kind of celebration at the Music Hall in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So I don't know if I would put I was a member or founding father or what to say there, but it's great. And thank you to the crew who's keeping it alive. Interesting that we're now kind of global. Which is fun, but please reach out to me if you want to connect on the topic that we're talking about or anything in general. So the lens that I have, I just want to reiterate, working in this kind of from the outside in, right, as a consultant or an agency or working on project-based work, I would admit that gives me a certain lens into remote workshops, and I'll talk about some of the differences as we go through. But I like to think about, as a consultant, one of the key things that we used to do is a company would hire us to come up with a new product or a new idea or a new way to think about something. And very often we would start those projects with, well, we're going to do a workshop. You have a lot of insight and experience and perspective working in the industry and the business that you're in. Let's bring that to bear. We will bring structure and methodology that helps bring out creative ideas from a variety of different perspectives and disciplines within your organization. And we'll conduct these as a workshop. And it was travel for us, right? We'd have to go to the client site. We'd ask or we'd look for any type of opportunity to use a creative space or an incubator room to try to help set the mood. We would definitely order food and try to have an evening afterwards or before where we'd be more social and go out to eat and things like that. Lots of sticky notes. I remember I had a bin that I called my workshop bin that had all these pens and crayons, and it even got to the point where we had Legos and popsicle sticks and whatever we would need, right, to try to facilitate that kind of creative, tactile environment. People would be standing up. And so we did this a lot. Now, you know what it looks like, right? Now it looks a lot different. It is typically involving a collaborative workspace on a Zoom like this, or some type of technology. And we adapted, I would say, basically, when the pandemic started and this really needed to accelerate, we kind of adapted what we did in person to to online, right? But it's just disorienting, to say the least, to do these types of workshops, to truly get at creativity and bringing out the best ideas from people when you're not getting that feedback. You're not in the room with people. And so the natural reaction is to say, well, okay, I did a couple of these. I've been doing it for 10 years, 15 years, but now I'm like a fish out of water. Am I doing this right? Does it make sense? Are people doing something better than what I know how to do with this? There's got to be something different, because it doesn't feel natural to me. And I felt like an imposter. It's like, well, should I even be doing this? Am I setting it up right? Am I maybe not thinking of what I need to do to have success with these workshops? Because it just didn't feel the same, right? But I could get over the imposter syndrome maybe that I had, and my own feelings. I could get over that. But really what drove me to think about this more is, are we really maximizing? Are we making use of people's time? Are we getting out of this what we need? Are we being as creative as we were before? Are we getting the good ideas? We invest a lot of time. We used to do it in the in-person workshops. We'd have a 4-hour thing or a full day thing. And now we're doing shorter things and trying to fit it in and dealing with people's dogs and things are happening. Should we even be doing it? Are we getting the right results out of it? That was really more important than my own personal feelings. I still had belief, or I still have belief, in these types of environments, in these types of workshops, people coming together to envision something that we couldn't do on our own. Maybe I'm an optimist, but I truly believe that if somebody's coming at things from a marketing perspective and another is coming at things from a technology perspective, and another person has done a whole bunch of research, when you mix those ideas together, I still believe that you can come up with something greater than the individual parts, or that we could have done as an individual. So that's what drove me to really think about this space, and am I doing it right? And how can I maximize my time doing these workshops? So what I did is turn to my heritage as a researcher, UX researcher, and I did some research. What are other people doing on this topic? And so I put out a call to my professional network and the community, and I was able to talk with a lot of different people in a fair number of different industries and with different experience about, tell me about how you've been reacting. This is probably a year or a year and a half into the pandemic. And so people had settled into doing Zooms and WebEx and all that, but they also had the opportunity to be thoughtful and rethink a little bit about how they were using these the virtual environment for workshops in particular and creative endeavors together. So I was happy you see some mix of people here in terms of industries, size of company. I was able to talk with some people at Mural directly, which was a great experience. And I have some learnings and some things that they all inspired me by. I'd have to say that one of the learnings was, and just to be clear about the context here, is that when I say workshops, and I've been saying creative endeavors and innovation, there are a number of different flavors to that, right? It could be meeting together to strategize or to develop empathy towards your audience, prioritize, as you see some of these things here. The most challenging ones that I see are the design and solution, this idea that we want to create something together. What can we do that builds off each other's ideas? The critique is probably the easiest thing to do because the format really enables that. But the style of workshops that we do kind of blend these lines, but I just wanted to be clear about the scope of what we're talking about here. So of those people that I talked to, several, they all used kind of different tools, but to me, the conversation was not about the tools. I wasn't looking to say which feature do you use and what thing here or that. It was more like, what's the what's the dynamics that you're trying to get? How are you getting the results that you want out of these workshops? So I'd advocate for all of these tools, and I'm not going to really get into tools or how to use them necessarily, but we have our favorites. Clients that I work with have different ones that they use, but to me, it's more than about the tools. It's about, are we doing things right? And so when I talked to them, several people said, this is actually great. This idea of doing these workshops virtually is terrific. The tools are cool. It really democratizes how people participate. And if you have introverts, they're able to participate. Whereas in the past, they were intimidated by these dynamic people around the room. I can't tell you how many pictures I've had on my phone in years past of whiteboards. You don't have to deal with that anymore and transcribing it. It really facilitated synchronous and asynchronous work. There was a fair number of positives. So I said, maybe there's a lot to this here, that maybe if I'm having mixed results, maybe I can learn from the people who really embrace it and are getting a lot out of it. And in fact, you can see in some literature, there's people that are talking about this. Like, just because you're tired at the end of the day after Zooms doesn't mean that collaboration is negatively impacted, right? There's a whole school of thought that we can take advantage of the strengths of this. But as you can imagine, the other reaction is, I hate this. It used to be so fun to be in those rooms, and we would generate good ideas, and you would say something, or we'd take a break, and that's when we'd have the best conversations, and we'd come back and we'd re-strategize or change the direction in which we were going. And that kind of soft feelings, a lot of people couldn't put a finger on it, but they would say, I just don't feel it. I'm spending so much time on all the logistics, and people don't know how to work Miro and blah, 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 right? And so just like a lot of things in the world, you can also find articles that talk about this. This one is recently from the MIT research group, and they were looking at this idea of social networks and within work, and the weak ties that you have with people that you might see occasionally or talk with in the lunchroom or things like that. And it's actually those weak ties that really help enable kind of innovation and creativity. And so they have the other side of the perspective. So, I've been kind of following these things as I've been interested and seeing both sides of the coin. So I went back to my notes and I said, I got to make sense of this myself. But before I do, and before I talk to you about what I found, I'm interested in what you guys think of this idea. So I'm sure that, well, first of all, I know that you all participate in WebExes and Zooms and all this as meetings, but I'm interested in kind of some of those things that might be a little bit more collaborative, some of the things where you're trying to solution, where you're trying to brainstorm a bit, doing that with a group. So what I have for you is a workshop about workshops. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to use the chat here in Zoom. And what I've set up is a Miro board that has a very simple exercise. It is a rose, thorn, bud exercise. And so you probably heard of it. It's pretty simple. I'll just share my screen before I send this out, but I'll send this out on the chat, and I'd like you all to participate. So everybody's having dinner or whatever, just try to do something, a few contributions here. And the way rose, thorn, and bud things work, I originally heard about this from my kids' scouts, but it's also a kind of a workshopping technique. Rose is the good things. Let's find out what's working about a given environment or a focus space. So in this case, remote workshops. Thorns, as you can imagine, what's challenging about it. And then buds, what are some opportunities and maybe some ideas that we have that might help realize the potential of these things. So what I'd like to do, I'll see if this works. I'm venturing into a little bit of unknown territory here. So I will send to everyone in the chat for this meeting a link to the Miro you should all be able to get in as a guest. And if you're not familiar with Miro, I bet you'll be able to figure it out pretty quickly. But basically, take one of the sticky notes that's there and click on it and start typing in it. You'll see piles of sticky notes on the left if you want to drag one of those, if you don't want to use somebody else's, or there's a toolbar that you can add even more stickies if you want. So again, remote collaborative workshops, you're brainstorming, you're ideating, you're kind of building on each other's ideas, but you're doing it remotely. What's a rose? What's kind of good and helpful? What's a thorn? What's stinks about it? What's not working? And then bud, what maybe some ideas? What things could we do? So interactive portion, take like 2 or 3 minutes on this, and we'll see what you have to say. Looks like we got a bunch of people in there now, so thank you. If anybody have any questions about the Miro, need any help with that? Awesome. I'm seeing, keep it going. Seeing definitely some themes already emerging here. It looks like we have both some Zoom experts with using like little emoticons, as well as people who are just by default logged into Miro. Eva, I'm looking at you. Awesome. How about just another 60 seconds or so? Awesome. More accessible. Yep. Okay. All right. I'm going to share my screen again and kind of so we can make sure you're all on the Miro board so you can kind of see what other people are doing here, but just so we can comment and make sure that we're all together. So I see a lot in the rows category of that democratization that I talked about. You know, everyone's able to participate. It's people in different time zones. There's a cost aspect to this that allows people remotely to join in. Everyone looks equal. I like that because it's there's this aspect when you're in person, somebody who's when the senior person in the room walks in, you know it, right? And they carry themselves that way. And so that kind of is equalized online. I think that's good, allowing some of the better ideas, more ideas to come out. The tools, I think the tools, we're using one right now. Instantly, I'm building up my knowledge of this space based on the documentation that's captured here with this tool. So the tools are definitely helpful. That said, on the thorn side, there's tool fatigue. I like that. There's a lot of fatigue in here, whether it be Zoom fatigue, tool, that means being online or using too many and they're always changing. But I also like this idea that it's harder to keep engagement going. So I talked earlier about when we used to do these, it would be 4 hours or 8 hours, or maybe even multiple days. The design sprint book came out and people are doing 5 days. You don't see that much anymore. So it's harder to keep the engagement going. The thorn, I like this. I know expo markers, like they trigger some kind of hormone in you that has kind of creative energy. That's good. Missing subtle body language cues. I love that. I mean, I work with clients. I'll walk in and the culture is everybody's on camera. Then I'll walk into the next client and the culture is everybody's off camera to try to save energy. So that really varies. How about the buds here? What do people say? Sketch on paper, snap a pic, share. We'll talk about that. Yeah, because we definitely heard about that. Easier to organize outcomes. Zoom now recognizes gestures. Ooh, interesting. Is the person who put that in there able to talk about that a little bit? I'd love to hear more about that. And then more features popping up. Tell me more about Zoom gestures.
Yeah, this was me. This is Eva.
Hi, Eva.
Hold on, I need to put myself on camera. I just noticed this literally, that I saw a notice that asked me to whether Zoom should recognize gestures. So I think it's supposed to be like if you go thumbs up,
yeah,
it would create like save that reaction. I don't think it's working well.
Okay.
I literally just saw it in a meeting like a couple of days ago.
Yeah, and I think also like if you raise your hand, it will
yeah, let's see what happens.
that. So which brings the people faces up to the top, like when they have their hand raised or whatever. So it's like, you don't have to fumble with the toolbar. I wish they'll keep working on the mute button though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can there be like a hand
like,
mute?
Tip it. I remember one, and maybe it's Zoom or others, where you can, it's kind of like some of the FaceTime masks that come on and you can put like the, fake mustache on or something like that. There's some fun elements there maybe, which are kind of gimmicky, but also potentially something to tune in on. So, so thank you for this exercise. I'm going to take some of your notes here, kind of build on them, because there's some overlap with what I heard from people who are doing this a lot, and what you're talking about here, and kind of had an opportunity to extend that a bit. So what I found from an exercise, a more in-depth exercise with some of these folks, and see if it resonates with what you put there. The first thing I would say is that it's not a matter of, are we doing this for a little while and then we're going to go back to what we did before. Most people acknowledge that even if they preferred the in-person workshop, they need to find ways to make it work remote, because the cat is out of the bag, and getting people to go in, and especially all of them all at one time, is a challenge. So what people talked about, and what I believe, is that let's try to diagnose what's not working such that we can overcome that. And let's try to accentuate what is working. The roses, let's try to make a bouquet and really make it, get the most out of these. So what I did is, in that spirit, I took the feedback that people gave and my research and my talking with people about this, and boil it down to kind of 6 principles that I'm hoping you can walk away with, to maybe focus in on a few to help you maximize any effort you put into these remote workshops. So the first is that asking you to think critically about how you moderate and facilitate some of these sessions. So I like to think that I was okay at doing these sessions in person, but I never really thought about why, or really challenge myself too much. I mean, obviously I had coworkers and others that we could reflect on these sessions with, but my actual facilitation skills, they were kind of organic. But now that I'm really questioning myself, I really recognize that we need to think critically and be intentional about how we facilitate. So for example, what people would say is that, I'm operating blind. I can't see people. There's no difference between a workshop where we're trying to be creative and innovative with every other freaking meeting that we have on Zoom. And it's just a different kind of experience. So what I thought about this was I wanted to go back to, okay, well, what is the role of a facilitator in these workshops, and start to build up the structure of how I could optimize my skills and my approach here by thinking about these constructs. And that is, the role of a facilitator in these workshops is selecting the right exercises. I can do that. Defining the purpose and setting the context. It's very difficult when it's remote and you have to kind of tell people what to expect and how this is different. You have to bring a level of energy and enthusiasm such that others might kind of share some of that. And you do have to pay attention. You do have to read the room. You have to find a different way to do it other than reading body language, which comes rather naturally. So to that last point, there are some models out there that I found helpful. I've been a little bit more intentional about understanding the types of people and how they participate in these workshops. So this is one model that I've used. I didn't create it. It's by Cantor and the 4-player model. And so it's recognizing each person is likely to either move the conversation along or follow and support other people, or maybe there's naysayers or opposing folks. And those are all natural part of how people contribute to these. And so what I've learned to do, or I've tried to do, is tune into that more so than I did before. And I would rely on body language to do that. And so by really listening attentively to these, I can then shape my facilitation and my moderation of these sessions a little bit better. So when I thought about this in total, it's that listening, it's over preparing, it's repeating the purpose. When we're in person, I can bring an energy and I can say, here's what we're doing today, guys. But when it's a Zoom meeting, when it's a WebEx, I do a lot more proactive ahead of time, sending them about how this is going to work, why we're doing it this way, what the purpose is, why I'm going to ask you to do something silly at the beginning. It's all for a purpose, right? And so it's kind of that over communication is what people talk about. The other thing is embracing the cameras off. Like, it forces you not to have to look at people, read people's facial expression. So using some of the things that are built into the tools, like the voting or other feedback, as a way to kind of augment your facilitation. So that's one. Really think critically about your role as a facilitator, or the facilitator's role in this. So that's principle number one. So principle number two is exactly as I've talked about before. The dog is barking in the background. My phone's ringing. I got a contractor coming to the door. I'm doing laundry. Whatever it is, there's that many more distractions when you have people online. And so what I heard from people is more of a traditionalist. I don't know if you can guess who it was, but very frustrated with these online things because people are, oh, sorry, I was just multitasking, or sorry, I had to step away for a second, or sorry. It's like, God darn, if I hear sorry one more time. We used to be in a room and we'd go until there was a break. We don't do that anymore. We have to think about, how do we make things more engaging, or how do we get people, or what do we do? And what people talked about, and what really resonated when I talked to some of these people who are doing it a lot, is you can't fight it. There's just no way to fight that. People are going to be interrupted. And so what I heard a lot of people do is something that we saw here at the beginning of this meeting even, which is to provide outlets for that distraction. I know when my family is around and if somebody's watching TV, what are they doing? They're watching TV, but they're also on their phone at the same time. It's like, we're wired now these days to have so many tabs open in our brain that we need that distraction. Otherwise we get bored, we can't pay attention. And so might as well provide them with outlets to have distractions that are purposeful for your brainstorm. So whether that be you're having a live discussion, but you encourage people to use chat or add in their own sticky notes or those types of things so that they can do those and have their distractions be intentional. I also find that the timer is a cool aspect and a cool dynamic. You can't use it for everything, especially those most creative endeavors where you're sketching or doing other things. But for other activities of voting and others, it keeps things moving. It keeps people very focused on that. And then just generally, you do have to just react or adapt to the fact that people have shorter attention spans when they're online. And so you have to break up your sessions. You have to accelerate your tempo, your speech even, such that you kind of keep things moving. So that's number 2, adapting and changing to meet people where they are with their level of engagement. Number 3 is thinking about the implications of being online and what that does to us kind of in our cognitive thinking. And so what I mean by this is that when people get onto a Zoom, onto a workshop, they're like counting the minutes until the Zoom is over, right? They are not necessarily focused on creative thinking. Others kind of have the sense that if I'm writing, if I'm engaging parts of my body, perhaps that has an effect on me. And we used to do that when we would be in these in-person workshops and we'd ask people to get up and put things on the wall and do a wall walk and do other kinds of activities, build a tower with Legos or whatever it is. And so there's this sense that by kind of having different modes of how we think or different activities while we're thinking is helpful. And so did a little bit of research, and there are some psychological principles that help us understand this. And so the first is this idea of distributed or extended cognition, is that we think differently when we engage different parts of our body. And if we get outside, if we use our hands, if we're drawing and writing instead of using a keyboard, that might activate different parts of the brain. There's also this idea that if you're in a different context, if you're in a different situation, I know I'm in this room that I'm in all the time now because I'm working from home. And it used to be that if you go into these incubator spaces or innovation labs or just a nicer conference room or conference room that's known as where people go to brainstorm, you get in a different headspace and mind space. And so knowing that that's okay to lean on is helpful. And lastly, I think we're all probably familiar with this, with the idea of online work, is that we are synchronous. Only one person can talk at a time, whereas these workshop rooms used to be loud and there used to be dialogue and things like that. And so it's okay to recognize that there are things blocking our creativity when we try to do these things online and trying to overcome that. So what do we do about all this stuff? A few things is I've done some activities where people feel really awkward, but I force them to stand up during a remote Zoom workshop or get outside or move. I definitely do a lot of, and I think this was put in our Rose, Thorn, and Bud activity. A lot of what I do when I'm trying to be really creative with a group is I tell them ahead of time, bring a pencil and paper or bring a pen and paper, and turn off your camera. And now is your time to sketch or to draw or to do a diagram. Everybody's got a phone. Just take a picture of it and upload it to the Miro board or whatever board you're using. I also am much more intentional about giving people in between time and time for reflection, such that they don't have to do everything at once. They can get up, they can move away from their desk, they can go to a different space and dedicate that time to reflection. So just kind of understanding those things has really helped me to say, I'm not crazy for asking people to draw or to get up and move around, because there's a rationale and a reason to do it. So that's principle number 3. Principle number 4, a lot of what people talk about is the fact that they lament that the social part of things. You're not really getting a chance to meet each other. You're working on, this is what a lot of people said, is that, I know some of the people, so I feel generally safe, but now as we're hiring new people and I never met these folks in person ever, we've always been very much on Microsoft Teams, and I've never kind of met them. So the implication of that is that you don't feel quite as emotionally safe in terms of sharing ideas. And that has a real impact on the type of workshop that we're talking about. There's also this aspect of, well, if we're online, I can kind of sit back, I can turn off my camera. I'll know when somebody asks me a question, I'll speak up, but otherwise I got to get to the next meeting, right? So and the last thing here is that it could also work the other way, is that people say, well, I don't know that person very well, so I'm hidden behind a screen. I'll just spout off with whatever I think is right, or maybe I can be more negative because I never have the consequence of meeting that person live in person. So some strategies to get over some of these is, this is one of the people I interviewed sent this to me. She's like, this was the best thing we ever did, is we drew stupid little horses. And we had such a blast with it. And it really helped us open up and feel comfortable with each other about laughing about, what the horse is blowing out its nose, or the fact that there's a carrot right down there. People really had fun. They just felt more safer and more as a team together. So definitely kind of leverage those games and competitions. They're a little glitchy and you got to be careful about them. But there's a rationale and a reason to do them. The other thing that I've found is really helpful is the breakout rooms. I don't know what the breakout room, somebody's described it to me as like, we're in the breakout room. Now we can finally speak freely, right? When you have a room that's, a workshop is 10, 12, 15 people, everybody needs to be on the same page. That's a kind of a large workshop for a virtual, but I definitely experienced those. Use the breakout rooms, and people get in the breakout rooms and they immediately let their guard down. They feel, somebody described it to me as like they're on the back of the bus together, right? As school kids. And so definitely like using those. So 2 more principles here. A lot of people called this out as kind of one of probably the best thing about these remote workshops that people put in that Rose exercise before, is that people really enjoyed the fact that people from all over the world, peoples of all different types of personalities, contributions, can share things so much easier. I say really embrace that. There's this idea that if we don't, there's an outsider bias. I run into this as a consultant. People kind of defer to the outsider when some of the insiders have a lot of the information. So you have to be careful of that. But if you structure things in a way to get equal contributions from people, that's great. I talked to one group and they said, what we do when we log in is we set the settings in our virtual collaboration tool that everybody is anonymous. Even though we all know each other, they take it to that next level where they say, we want you to be able to put in a sticky or make a comment on something or add a drawing or an idea and not be tied to who it is. I thought that's taking it to that next level. The other thing here, this idea of brain writing. You might have heard of that technique before, but it's basically taking an idea, doing a brainstorming session where you take an idea, then you pass your idea to the next person, and they have to be inspired by that idea and build on it. And so doing that intentionally, I found really helps get people, the entirety of the participants in a workshop like this, to contribute. The other thing I mentioned earlier, which is kind of a crossover, is for those introverts, or not necessarily introverts, but some people who don't like the timing aspect. When we're talking about creative workshops, we're talking about generating ideas. Some people feel really constrained when it's like, quick, come up with an idea. You have 1 hour in the session. And so I've done a fair number of these where we have a session at 9 in the morning or early in the day, where we say, here's the context, here's the business problem, here's the bounds of what we're trying to do. Your instructions are to go off during the course of the day and on your own come up with sketches or ideas that do this. And we're going to meet again at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and review them. So that gives people time to marinate, think, take a shower, to activate their brain, whatever they do for them to help them. So don't always jam these workshops into 4-hour sessions. And then lastly, the principle is something that somebody again mentioned in that Rose, Thorn, and Bud, and that's embracing the real goodness of these tools. Everything is all in one place. And in fact, what I really see as a benefit is not just using these workshops for this or these tools for this workshop, but embedding that into the entirety of the whole project lifecycle. And so, that's the way we do it now, is that we will have any kind of business discovery or user research all posted in these online collaboration tools. We'll have our early wireframes or sketches there. We'll have the workshop agenda, and all the output from the workshop is all connected together. And when you highlight those and you kind of keep everything together, probably this is kind of the most obvious one, is that it really helps people stay connected to what the output was and why it was important to do that collaborative activity. So good presentation practices to summarize what you learned. So hopefully this is a helpful kind of breakdown of the different aspects of these remote collaborative workshops that I've found are helpful to think about in order to maximize and get the most out of the time and the investment that you have in these. So with that, that's the end of the formal presentation part. I welcome any experiences that you have doing these workshops, or questions that you have, or anecdotes, what went well, what didn't go well for you when you did them, or questions that you have, either that's live, or if you embraced my recommendation to put them in the chat, that's good too. So Julia, I don't know, you've been monitoring the chat. I've been chatting away. I've been talking away. So do we have any questions or thoughts here?
Yeah, there's a couple comments. Let me see. Thank you for the excellent presentation, by the way. That was really fun and encouraging that there are ways to improve what we're doing these days. I'm giving me hope.
I will admit that not all the ones that I've done have gone great. So that's why I wanted to do this work and looking at this, is because I've had some where people show up and they're like, this is stupid. Why are we doing this? I thought we hired you as the designer to do it. What are we here for? It's just more ornery than it was in the past. And so I don't want to paint that it's always roses. And so that's why being thoughtful about this, especially that prep work, if you're asking somebody to draw horses, you got to tell them why you're doing it. And you got to be clear about that rationale for sure. But I've had others that have gone great, and they say, wow, look at all we accomplished. And now, we just saved ourselves 2 weeks of back and forth on emails and design comments and revisions, because now we all know what we're thinking and we've built this up together, and we're all agreed on why we're going in a certain direction. So there's promise out there.
All right, that sounds good. And kind of related to that, Christine actually said, I love the concept of embracing anonymity. So it's a double-edged sword, right? That people feel more comfortable expressing themselves when they feel more anonymous, or at least they're not in the same room as you, but they also feel more comfortable expressing themselves. how do you handle when people forget that there's a human on the other side of that screen? Just how do you keep going on those really discouraging experiences?
I think it's okay to it's okay. I have to admit that I have not had a lot of settings where I've done the full anonymous mode. This was with somebody at Dell, I believe, EMC Hannah was talking about this, and they've totally embraced this. They don't do any workshops in person, and she was the one who's like, we only allow anonymous contributions in a lot of our workshops. Obviously, when you're talking, you know who's talking, but for these kind of sticky note exercises and things like that, my sense is from her that it's a professional environment, so people are professional enough. If it got to the point where people were not being polite or what have you, I'm sure she would step in and moderate that. But I think there's also a way to kind of take it and have a kind of commiseration with people, like, this freaking sucks, or I can't believe this happened, or that person in research said this, holy crap, we're in trouble. There's a way to kind of make light of it and to have that kind of community rally around that. So that's what I would expect on something like that. Kind of a similar type of thing that I heard for a story from one of them was, they said they kind of used the chat. They said, let's go to the chat and say, what kind of music would you listen to for something like this? What kind of equates to this? And somebody typed in, we're doing AC/DC Highway to Hell. And it got everybody laughing, and it kind of broke the ice in and of itself, right? And so even though it was negative, it kind of helped develop that camaraderie, which I think is ultimately a positive. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, go ahead. Stu, get a couple hands up here, Stu. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Great presentation. I've had some go not so well also. Like I was working for a startup before the pandemic, and then we got bought out by Nike, and then pandemic happened. So I've been doing a lot of different stuff with internal Nike apps, and I found like doing training on what we're going to do before we do it has helped. It's not the luxury you have all the time, but I'm always on the lookout for good icebreakers. Is there anything you'd recommend, or things that work well?
I participated in one of these kind of workshops. It was I think you're seeing a lot more of these things now where actually I wouldn't even call it a workshop, but it was more like a summit, right? And so hey, we're all kind of distracted, especially like UX groups who might be in a federated model where one person's working on this product, another person's working on this other product in a big company, right? And so they come together as a team, quarterly or what have you, to share their experiences and be consistent in their design or whatever it is. And their homework for their quarterly meetup or 6-month meetup was to make Pokemon cards of each other or for themselves. And so each person had to make their own Pokemon cards that told something a little bit about themselves. And it was on the Miro board, and it was light. So it wasn't that kind of overwhelming, but it was personal, right? And so that type of idea of, Pokemon cards, that took a little bit of work, but it can be really simple of like, who would you want to have, lunch with, or what's your ideal golf foursome, or, I mentioned the music thing, what's on top of your playlist. It's just some of those easy personal things. You don't have to all draw horses and do some kind of design exercise because people don't have as much patience as they did before. They want to get off the Zoom meeting, right? Yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
So I've been a remote worker most of my career, and usually it was a variation of being on site and being remote, but some clients were just in different parts of the country. And so when I started working with Agilent, who I work with now, they all the teams in Germany, except for Kim and I, who were in the United States East Coast. And when the pandemic happened, it was like the great equalizer.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. Everybody had to be remote. Everybody had to learn how to behave on Zoom calls and workshops and things like that.
Mhm.
And they gained a great appreciation for what that was. And then the pandemic ended, and they said, let's try and keep this great, dynamic that we have going on. But I can see, as they're all now back in the office, they're still doing some remote stuff on certain days. And the days that more people are remote, it's easier to work with people. But the days that they're all in the office, it's like they have their own dynamic in the conference room when we're doing workshopping or we're doing meetings or any of these things. And then we're isolated from that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I mean, some other things that you've mentioned in here are very, very helpful. And I think that there are ways that could help move that forward. But I didn't know if you had any particular recommendations for ways to work with remote people. I mean, I know working with a remote team where the larger team is actually not remote and
Yes.
you are remote. I think that our team is probably open to suggestions. One of the things we had to do was, and it was interesting that you mentioned this, was there is different ways that people communicate, and the people who are the most awake and the loudest and can end up dominating the entire conversation, which when all of their meetings are their end of day and yours crack of dawns, there's a very big difference in how well you contribute. And I would also say that they do a lot of workshopping type of stuff that we just can't attend. So I didn't, the meetings are at maximum 2 hours long because that's just how much time they have left in the rest of their day. So I realize that my situation is a little bit unique, but I am very interested to know if you have any insights into ways to improve that dynamic.
It's not unique. A lot of people have that same question. When I've talked about this to others, that one of the first questions I get is, well, what if some of us are together and some of us are not? So that's very common. And my first reaction used to be, don't do that. Just because that's the in-person people are going to dominate. And what's the point of having the remote people join in? That said, you don't want to just not do these types of things. And so I've asked people and encouraged people to say, well, if you're going to have half of you are going to be in person, can at least those in-person people all have their laptops with them, which doesn't seem to be a burden for people too often. Can we still use the Miro board? You all can be in person, but don't use the physical whiteboard, please. Can you track it on Miro? And everybody should be at their, they all come to the conference room with their laptops and they contribute that way. That it's a way to try to get some equity in it, because you're then able to follow. I remember in the old days, I used to point my laptop screen at the whiteboard and I'd say, okay. And the one person who was remote would be like, I can't hear. It's terrible. Can't see what you're talking about. And so if we use the Miro board, it's just one kind of small step. I know it seems kind of obvious, but sometimes you have to tell people the obvious things. Yeah, go ahead, Christine. You want to add on to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to comment a little earlier when we were talking about maybe like having a rowdy bunch or a cantankerous individual, but I think this comment applies here too. Something that I've really tried to embrace is starting each session with a norms slide. Any of us who are working in agile settings kind of, we know the concept of team norms. So I try to set work session norms. And one thing that I have tried to say is like, or do, is try to anticipate the specific things that I think people will just naturally be uncomfortable with, if, whatever the particular discussion is, or the big decision that's looming. And I try within the norms to call it out ahead of time. Like, it's okay to be wrong and, still share an idea. It's okay to, not have the answer and still share an idea. It's okay to, and then like, it's not okay to do these few things, which is shut people down. And in the case where we do have a hybrid scenario, I try to call out, like, be mindful in the room, not to talk over one another, so the people online can hear and follow the conversation. And, of course, facilitating you stop and, and engage with the, you know, the folks online. But I have found that since I started that norms slide, like really just setting expectations and setting the tone from the outset has helped me, because I've definitely had scenarios where even before the pandemic, I worked in a company that was pretty distributed. So we were in that type of scenario before it was like the full norm. And, you know, I get like, I've had a couple of cranky people, and so I've noticed since I've embraced the norms slide, I think it helps to kind of create, like, set a tone of like, just we're humans first. I always tell people too, and I love your comment too about or your slide about embracing kind of where people are at and just making space, like, yeah, go to the bathroom. That has to happen. Like, were you on it? Or like do what you need to do and take care of yourself. And you said it before, it seems like an obvious thing to have to say, but I don't know that it is so obvious to all of us when we are really swept up in a culture of like, do more, faster, you know, balance more, perform, you know, all that crappy stuff that we all just juggle because we're part of this culture in our country. And yeah, I don't know. I think it just helps to state those things, like, we're all human. It's okay to make mistakes. Don't be a jerk.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you all. If you want to continue the conversation on this topic, I'm still learning. We're all still learning and kind of getting our way through it. Love to hear, you know, any stories that you have. If you have a workshop that bombs, please let me. I would love to know about that, or one that really goes well. Obviously, it's good things to learn about there. So, thank you guys, New Hampshire UXPA, for setting this up.
Thank you.
Coming at you from New Hampshire, so love it. So
yeah, we did forget to say that you, or actually, I think you mentioned it at the outset.
Yeah.
We're sort of in our New Hampshire roots a little bit tonight by having you here. So nice and comfy. We love it, and really appreciate you taking us through this, like putting some dialogue and naming a few things that I think we all are like, what is this world we're living in? So
I will share that. I'll share you obviously recording here, but I will share this the set of slides with you as a PDF. So through the New Hampshire UXPA, happy to have those for reference. So
thank you
all.
All right, everyone, have a wonderful night.
Christine, wait. Did you want to share the last?
Oh yeah, I did.
Oh yeah, one more.
One final announcement.
Ooh.
Looking ahead to our next month's meeting. Thank you, Julia. You can tell.
And Mike, you're getting lots of love in the chat. So
good. Thanks.
So our October meeting is embracing this election cycle that we're in. And so we are planning to have a UX debate. And we're looking for volunteers to take part in this knock down, drag them out, just kidding, this event. But what we have in mind is probably a 15-minute time block. You'll be given your topic, but you won't know which side you're advocating for. That will be like kind of drawn from a virtual hat. And we'll have some online interaction in the audience, people voting for you know, which direction they think they're being swayed in anyway. So if you're interested, if you feel like you kind of, this could be your thing, or maybe it's not your thing, but you just want to try it anyway, reach out to me directly. You can find me on all the various places, and my email address is on our website. I should have had that handy, but I'm findable. So yeah, if you think this could be for you, reach out, because we need to get some good debaters going.
Christine, can we email the email that's on the slide, or is that?
Oh, yes, perfect. Thank you. I was like, why would the email be on here? It is. Good. Yeah, definitely. It'll be fun. I think we're looking forward to just kind of making light of, again, the world we're living in. All right. Thanks again, everyone. And thank you, Mike, especially.
Good to see you guys.
Okay. Have a great night.
everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.